Sometimes the most faithful witness is costly speech, and other times it's costly silence. What does it mean to be a faithful witness? Well, we find two examples from both ends of a spectrum, from speaking to silence. Jesus is a faithful witness both in his speaking and in his silence. First, we see in Mark 14, beginning in verse 53, Jesus speaking the truth even though it was unbelievably costly. They led Jesus away to the high priest, and all the chief priests, the elders and the scribes assembled. Peter followed him at a distance, right into the high priest's courtyard. He was sitting with the servants, warming himself by the fire. Verse 55, the chief priests and the whole Sanhedrin were looking for testimony against Jesus to put him to death, but they couldn't find any. For many were giving false testimony against him, and the testimonies did not agree. Some stood up and gave a false testimony against him, stating, "We heard him say he will destroy this temple made with human hands, and in 3 days I will build it back, another not made by hands." They were lying. That's not what Jesus said. Yet their testimony did not agree even on this. Then the high priest stood up in verse 60 before them all and questioned Jesus. "Don't you have an answer to what these men are testifying against you?" But he kept silent and did not answer. Again, the high priest questioned him, "Are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One?" "I am. I am," Jesus said. "You will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power and coming with the clouds of heaven." Remember, in the preceding chapter, Mark 13, we learned that that is apocalyptic language. Verse 63, then the high priest tore his robes and said, "Why do we still need witnesses? You've heard the blasphemy. What is your decision?" They all condemned him as deserving death. Then some began to spit on him, to blindfold him, and to beat him, saying, "Prophesy!" The temple servants also took him and slapped him. Have you ever been faced by this challenge from a skeptic? Jesus never claims to be God. They asked him, "Are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One?" And his answer caused the high priest to tear his robes. He responded, "I am." Why is that significant? When he said this, they would have understood beyond a shadow of a doubt that Jesus was claiming to be God. I am is the name God gives to Moses in Exodus 3:14. When the Lord appears to him in a burning bush and tells him to go back to Egypt, where his people had been enslaved for hundreds of years, and tell the king of Egypt, Pharaoh, "Let my people go." And Moses understandably says, "Who shall I say sent me?" And the answer is the same as the words that Jesus just gave to the high priest. I am. Tell him I am has sent me. Here's the reality. Jesus knew by responding in this way it would infuriate them, but it was true. And a faithful witness will speak the truth even when it's costly, even when it's dangerous. You know, we live in a unique time in history. The message of Christianity has so influenced Western civilization that it has really become the air we breathe. In many ways, we take this Christian influence for granted. That's not to say that Western civilization has been Christianized, but it has definitively been impacted by Christian values. It's possible for us, because of this, to proclaim the simple gospel publicly without necessarily facing any significant backlash. If you were to say Jesus is the only way on your social media, in your workplace, in the places where we play and study, if you were to say Jesus is the only way, you might get made fun of. But if you directly address the trendy idols of our culture, like transgenderism or abortion, and call them what they are, mental disorders and murder, you could face losing your job or even being targeted for violence. This is not in any way to imply that the gospel is not offensive. The cross is absolutely offensive. Why? Because it says you will never be enough. You'll never be enough to deserve heaven. That's the bad news that makes the good news so good. That bad news deeply offends the unregenerate mind. At the same time, as offensive as the cross is, as offensive as the gospel is, we can give vague enough platitudes that sound Christianish without offending anyone. Francis Schaeffer said that we are called to stand against the spirit of the age, but the spirit of the age takes on different forms. And if we're standing against a form of evil from a past generation, it's not countercultural. Let me give you an example. This would be like somebody standing up here and saying, slavery is evil. And all of us are like, yeah, that's not controversial. But to stand up here and say, as I've just said, transgenderism is a mental disorder and we shouldn't celebrate it, and mutilate children could get me fired, could get me doxxed, could get me killed. Because the spirit of the age takes on different forms, and we have to stand against the form in our generation. That's what it means to be a faithful witness like Jesus. So we have to face this question: am I willing to speak the truth without compromise, even if it costs me everything? And other times, wisdom dictates that we maintain our silence. Jesus models this for us in the following morning here in Mark 15, the first 5 verses. It says, as soon as it was morning, having held a meeting with the elders, scribes, and the whole Sanhedrin, the chief priests tied Jesus up, led him away, and handed him over to Pilate. So Pilate asked him, are you the king of the Jews? And he answered him, you say so. And the chief priests accused him of many things. Pilate questioned him again. Aren't you going to answer? Look at how many things they're accusing you of. Verse 5, but Jesus did not answer. And Pilate was amazed. Since planting Northtown Trinity Church just a little over 3 years ago, I've been called a few things. I think I'm a pretty likable person. Maybe I'm, misled. Maybe I'm not as likable as I think, because I've been called a few names over the past few years. A wolf in sheep's clothing, a false teacher, one of Satan's teachers. These are all names I've been called. Not sure if that one meant that I belonged to Satan or if I were teaching Satan. That was a little bit unclear. And a couple weeks ago on TikTok, because of my unfortunate hairdo, I was called a skinhead. It was stated, of course a skinhead would think that. Now, the impulse when you're called ugly names like this is to defend yourself. But do you know what I've discovered? Defending my own reputation tends to have a reverse effect. Why? It comes off as insecure. Just needing you to know how actually good I really am. But most often when someone insults me in ways like that, they've already made up their mind about me. And defending my own honor just ends up making it about me. Jesus' accusers were telling all kinds of lies about him. He had as we talked about a moment ago, just prophesied about the impending destruction of the temple that would take place in AD 70. You can go back and read that in Mark 13. And they misquoted him as saying that he would destroy the temple, but he didn't jump to defend himself. He could have said, "You're taking me out of context. Go back and check the notes." But that wasn't what he did. And they knew that. That's why their testimonies didn't agree. They knew that wasn't what Jesus said. And still, he allowed them to say whatever they would. Listen, sometimes the most faithful witness is costly speech, and other times it's costly silence. When someone you care about is heading in a destructive direction, speaking the truth might cost you that relationship. But it's the faithful thing to do. On the other hand, if you're being slandered by coworkers, enduring that persecution and not retaliating can be an incredible way to mirror Christ's example in your workplace.